I sat down with a multi-billionaire who owned big companies, and he goes, it is so much easier to scale up. Buy equipment, spend money, hire people. It is so easy to scale up. It is so hard to scale down, to lay people off, because now your team members have become reliant on that extra person on their team. And the rental industry, because it is so seasonal, I think too many companies make permanent decisions for temporary problems.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Build, the podcast where innovation meets collaboration in the world of construction. We bring together thought leaders and industry experts to explore the cutting-edge ideas transforming construction equipment, supply chains, building materials, and workforce productivity.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Faro, the revolutionary last-mile logistics platform, redefining how high-value, time-sensitive construction deliveries get done. Need it fast? Need it right? Faro. Today, we're joined by Elliott Vigil, a powerhouse in construction sales, a top-tier trainer, and a name that sparks both admiration and respect in the rental industry. With over 20 years of experience, Elliott has trained and developed over 700 sales reps and leaders, helping them to navigate the unique challenges of the $2.4 trillion construction industry. From dominating sales at United Rentals and Ahern Rentals to founding his own training firm, Elliott knows what it takes to turn struggling teams into high-performing sales machines. He specializes in time management, sales efficiency, and turning logistical challenges into competitive advantages, all while rocking a killer beard that is just as legendary as his results. Whether you're a seasoned pro in the industry or just starting out, get ready to take notes, because today we're unpacking the biggest pain points in rental logistics and how to overcome them.
Talking about the heartburn that exists with salespeople and logistics.
Salespeople have a tendency to be more emergency-based, where logistics and service needs to have a little bit of planning and resource allocation. And unfortunately, sales reps rarely think about resource allocation. They say, there's a need, solve it. There's a need, solve it. And they don't realize that there's not an infinite amount of drivers. There's not an infinite amount of mechanics, and that decisions need to be made. And too often sales reps say, well, nobody's more important than my customer. And you say, okay, well, that's fine, but you have 5 customers, so pick your favorite kid. And the sales rep says, well, I don't have no ugly babies. Pick one. And that's the one who gets service. And unfortunately, when sales reps have to do that, it very much changes the way they understand the business. But most of the time, because they don't want the battle, operations, dispatch, and service rarely explain to sales reps the challenges they face every day. Hence the reason why the division between sales and service and ops.
Do you have experience on that side of the fence as well? I know you mostly from, just your incredible sales knowledge and instruction ability, but do you also have the ops side too? Or what's your kind of perspective there? Where did you gain that understanding?
So for a little while, I was a vice president for a company called United Rentals.
Okay, I've heard of them, I think.
I was in charge of their it's a little town just west of here, Las Vegas. So I was the vice president for United Rentals in charge of Las Vegas. And that was a lot of operational knowledge there. That was a lot of P&L time, which I thought had a completely different abbreviation, but apparently it means looking at a lot of numbers and never stopping looking at numbers and making a lot of very, very tough business decisions. And then watching a multi-billion-dollar economy like Las Vegas go bankrupt in 6 months. City Center, bankrupt. Fontainebleau, bankrupt. Echelon, which later became Resorts World, bankrupt. And I sat front seat and watched all those go bankrupt while trying to manage a P&L.
Well, one of the things I like that you do so much, Elliott, is you get people to think. And what your company does is elevating, he talked about sales reps, right? And getting people to understand both what operations constraints are and what the sales reps, I guess you would call it, expectation of operations is. And so your company, what you do so well, and you're a character now, my friend, Like when JP, we were at ARA and I was walking over to meet Elliott and he was in a conversation with somebody else, right? And I'm listening to people walk by under their breath. Hey, there's Elliott. There's Elliott. It's like watching a
There's
movie
the
star or
beard.
something, right? He's no longer Elliott. He's the character Elliott because he's amassed this following of magnificent content. And I think you're well over like 13,000 followers just on LinkedIn. Were these sales reps and these operators in management he talked about who manage P&Ls and spreadsheets, they're now realizing that, like, wait a second, we need to think about the business differently. You know, sales reps, you know, from an operations standpoint, we were always like, sell what's in the cart. And they're like, well, no, I want to sell the whole store. And so you're trying to figure out, you're like, okay, well, how do we be proactive? Right? Are you calling on just the purchaser who his primary role might be to execute a list at the lowest cost possible? Or are you building relationships with the superintendents, the foremans, to basically say, what is your scope of work like for the next 2 weeks? And how do we fit in those deliveries for your compressors, your rollers, and your forklifts so that you're not in a fire drill? So I can go tell my ops team, hey, I need 2 skip loaders, I need 2 10Ks. Let's get them turned. Let's get them picked up. Let's put them on the line, because you know what the worst thing could happen? They pushed the reservation to tomorrow instead of today. So we just created capacity.
Well, and absolutely 100%. Like, if I could tell anybody, if you're going to take one thing away from this conversation, I watch so many sales reps. Hey, customer orders a piece of equipment. Not a problem, Mr. Customer. Yep, we'll have it there tomorrow morning at 7. You know what they never did? When do you need it? And what kind of window do I have? The problem
Give
is
yourself an opportunity, right? Give yourself a chance.
yeah, and we make these assumptive closes with, well, I'm so happy to get the order. I'm going to just assume that he wants it tomorrow morning at 7. And the customer is like, you know what? I don't care. But the branch does. And moving it till 11 o'clock, if the guy just wants it there that day because he's preparing for the next day.
And that's the difference between, you know, sometimes we call sales and order takers. There's people inside that take an order, and then sometimes they do a really good job because there's a lot of great companies out there that put development into their teams, both inside and out. And those who are really elevating are the ones that are using Elliott because he's helping them elevate. But even when an order comes in, you know, you don't have to say something like, let me check on that and see if I can get to you. I think we can do that, and I'm going to do the best I can. When the end user heard like 2 no's and a maybe, where you can elevate and say, hey, you're in luck. I got something for you. Looking like a 10 o'clock window. Is that going to work with you? It's like, sell your capacity, right? Sell your capacity. Don't just say, ooh, I'm excited because my phone rang. And then what ends up happening too, and Elliott, I know we've lived this life between being in sales, and I used the analogy on the last podcast about being in a submarine in a torpedo room and just wanting to blow things up, not knowing your range. And the captain is like, hey, you just exposed us. Rather than blowing something up, I use that, and I won't beat that dead horse. But at the same time, it's like, we've got to understand, like, hey, I'm a sales rep today and I'm focused on kill, go get the deal. And then what happens is those sales reps eventually navigate to operations and branch managers. And for that short honeymoon phase, they're still sales and manager for like 3 months. And then they get inundated with P&L, like Elliott said. And then all it becomes is, my numbers don't look good. My numbers don't look good. And they lose sight of like what got them the numbers, the sales. Hence, we go to outside hauling, where now all of a sudden we're looking at, ooh, bad number on the P&L, cost. I have resources, when realistically, your resources can't match your capacity. And now your end user is waiting, and you're challenging your sales reps to be more creative when you have an opportunity to innovate with like something like Faro, where now we can say, hey, just take the order, which is what we all want to do, and get the unit out on the site to generate revenue, rather than trying to do cartwheels and backflips to figure out how we make it fit.
100%. But
So-
too often, and I watch sales reps, and here's the other part of that. They take orders, just like you said. They get all excited. And then all of a sudden, which I had dispatch tell me all the time, we can't deliver it. And the rep just sits there and they're immediately defeated, and it changes their focus. We didn't just lose the deal, we lost the momentum of the sales rep. Sometimes we just need daily wins to feel value.
I
That's
mean,
an
how
interesting point. Like
think
that,
about
'cause
this. We're talking about rental scenarios because that's where, we cut our teeth in. But this is something that happens in so many businesses. Supply chain, right? Whether it's building materials, you've got the contractor who owns stuff in their shops, right? You have rental companies, you have OEMs trying to get, I mean, this is not unique to just rental. Now, rental has shorter windows of like how fast you can get it there. Like the expectation is higher. Like you got a traffic light to make a decision and get it to me. But these are problems that all businesses face.
One of the big ones that needs to get discussed, and I really mean this, is right now we have a ton of dealerships and all kinds of dealerships, everybody from your John Deeres to your Caterpillars to whatever, and they're wanting to break into the rental market. And guess what? They're in a huge pickle right now because what they're doing is they're trying to assign their couple of drivers that deliver, pick up, and maintain sold, new and used, as well as service. And then they're like, well, we'll just share those resources and do rental, which you can't do. But the problem is that they haven't built their rental branch, their rental division within the company big enough to justify buying more trucks, more service techs, and more stuffs, which is where I think Faro could really help them bridge that gap. And
Well,
I think
it's a different model too. You think about, so here's what I'm thinking when I'm on a job site. Material is scheduled, right? I usually have a laydown yard. So what happens in on my supply chain is like I can do a milk run, allocated resource and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, a north to south loop, and we're going to drop off things because all the material is not going to be used all at the same time. Typically what happens is big contractors that are doing high profile projects, they're ordering truckloads of stuff and putting it in a laydown area so they pick it when they need it. Now you spend into a rental where it's a reactionary business. Some people will take the opportunity cost of having a forklift on site, having a boom lift on site because, hey, we need it. We don't know when, but we're going to pay for it to be here. And then other times they're like, I need something. I need it right now. So that it takes the vendor into a reactionary and going, no one planned for this. So if you're a building material company right now that is looking to dabble in the rental industry, we're saying go for it. Tons of opportunity, but just understand that it's a different side of the ball. You're playing defense and offense. And so, yeah, you're out on the field to play, but you play that positionally different.
and I don't know if you've seen, but that was one of the things that I've seen is that right now Whitecap recently purchased a company that had a rental branch, a rental arm. And people are like, yeah, you can actually, I had to research it. I went onto Whitecap's website, and lo and behold, there is a section there designated for rental equipment. Here's the other thing that's interesting. Equipment Share just said, all right, well, we're going to dabble in the contractor supply side. And they've opened, I think it's like 7 or 8, maybe it's more. I don't have the exact numbers, where they opened up contractor supply Ace Hardware stores across some of their market. And you realize that people are doing just that. It's a different industry. And you put it perfectly, or is it something that needs to be delivered and laid down, or is it something that needs reaction time?
And that's where we came in for Faro is like, I wanted to be like the ripcord for the parachute, right? Like something's happened. It's got to open. If it doesn't open, we're going to hit the ground too fast. And so we're built around the reactionary. Oops, I forgot. Oops, something broke down. And we're able to execute because right now the rental companies are doing the best they can. Supply chains are doing the best they can to manage the expectations of their customers and bail them out of pickles with their capacity. And I'm going like, hey, you got 10 arrows in your pouch.
That's right. In your quiver.
I'm going to give you another 15 so you can say yes more. And everybody wins.
And the biggest thing I think where that's going to make a massive impact is right now, it is now going to become 100% service industry. Is if you look, all of the rental companies right now, doesn't matter what your size is overfleeted anywhere from 5 to 10%. And they can tell because their utilization, both dollar utilization and time utilization is down. And if the deals come in, you have to be proactive and see, well, what's going to be our bottleneck? And the bottleneck is going to be, do you have enough service techs and do you have enough drivers? It's not fleet. And the problem is too many companies are going to sit there and they're going to say, well, the bottleneck is, can our sales reps get out there and sell? Well, the industry is going to correct itself this summer. If you live in North America, there's a boom in the summer. The peak rental months are July, August, September, October, those 4. And if you're going to capture the revenue, you need to capture it. If you're not looking at where it's going to get bottlenecked, you're a fool.
Well, when you look at these big companies too, so Elliot, you take the top 4 rental companies, or you take the top 1% of those rental companies, they have more fleet in their unavailable downline that they can't rent than probably 50 to 70 independents all combined of what they own. So that's talking about fleet that's been called off rent by the customer, not using it, stop my billing, I don't want to pay for this anymore. That's not back at the facility being washed, being serviced to go to someone else. Or you're waiting on a part, right? And it's not there yet. But yet I can't go pick up the part because my service mechanic, I have 2, had to go deliver a compressor that we put the wrong size out for. And so you have these bottlenecks going on over and over and over again. And a question I'd ask you, Elliot, because you deal with a lot of companies, when you talk to C-level members, how many companies have you dealt with that have been able to cost cut their way to profitability?
0. It is physically impossible. And it's funny right now because I realize as I go out and I sell sales coaching, I sell sales training, and companies right there, they're saying, well, we failed to hit our numbers in the fourth quarter of last year and in the first quarter of this year. So we're going to cut our budget of training our sales reps. And I'm like, you can't save yourself to profitability. And then I watch companies where they're like, look, we didn't hit our numbers last quarter and now this quarter. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut down on driver overtime. We're going to cut down on the number of trucks we have. We're going to downsize to reach what our budget needs to be. And the problem is they don't have an expansive mindset. They have a conservative mindset. And I hate to say it, but you're either making money when the sun's shining or you're losing to somebody who is. And it's going to be a big one because customers right now, we all know this. The rental industry, the equipment industry, I don't care if you're buying, selling, leasing, or selling new or selling used. It is almost 100% about relationship. And the second you can't take care of somebody, they're looking at the door. They're looking for someone else to take care of them. And if the right person says, I can deliver at 4 p.m., all right, you can have that deal. And it just changed that entire relationship.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack. And that, JP, that's why we talk. We can go on for days about scenarios, and it is about elevating, right? And I know there's companies out there that do a really good job of doing efficiencies, right? Kaizen, Lean, Six Sigma, right? Those are all programs that you can adopt as an organization to get better. And we applaud those companies that have been able to invest in those type of things. But there still becomes a range or a capacity that you're going to hit even with being super efficient, because you're going to have to start saying, okay, do we invest in more capital? Do we invest in more fixed assets, more people? And like Elliot talked about, seasonality, it's a real thing and you can be as efficient as possible. But what do you do in those like 9 months where you're like, okay, I love you, I want you here, but it's like, we don't have the business right now. How do you reallocate those resources within the organization and still be able to, make a return for your stakeholders?
Absolutely. One of the best things I ever heard, which really rocked my world, Scott, is I sat down with a multi-billionaire who owned big, big companies. And he goes, it is so much easier to scale up, buy equipment, spend money, hire people. It is so easy to scale up. It is so hard to scale down, to lay people off, because now your team members have become reliant on that extra person on their team. They have become reliant on, we have an extra truck. We have an extra. And so the second you start scaling up, either your business continues to grow or you better come up with something. And the rental industry, because it is so seasonal, I think too many companies make permanent decisions for temporary problems. And when you make a permanent decision, we need to buy another truck, we need to get another driver, we need to get a bigger building. They make permanent decisions for a temporary problem. And right now in the rental industry, it's the number one thing that's affecting the rental industry. During COVID, during 2020, guess what? Everybody went in, the industry came to a screeching halt. We lost a lot of people out of the labor pool. 2021, we realized that construction and the industries that we're all in and that we're serving were essential workers. 2022, 2023, 2024, the industry's on an absolute tear, 5% growth, GDP, just massive. And now everybody's realizing, oh my gosh, how do I react to this? And they don't know how to be flexible enough. Industry's changing. And the changes aren't like COVID was a stop, then we have a boom, then we have a stop, then we have a boom. If you don't learn to be flexible with your business, you're going to get ran over by somebody who is.
You know, what helped me is when I was spent my time in the rental industry is I ran oil and gas for a decade. And so the fluctuation in that business, your Q1 could basically set your numbers or your Q4, but in between, I mean, I had months where I would pump $25 million worth of fleet into my branch for 90 days. Or we had things where we were running triple shift, right? So you had employees because some of these outages, you could have north of 25, 3,500 people on site for a 45-day outage. So I had to figure out, how do I get $25 million worth of fleet into my branch, which I know I'm going to take a controllable asset hit while it sits there. Be prepared to deliver all these assets. And they weren't big assets. We're talking small. Could be golf carts, could have been 250 light towers. Each one of those has to be touched. So all you out listening in the rental industry, one of the things we branch managers, we used to puff our chest out is like, well, how much fleet do you own? Well, I own $250 million fleet. Well, that's fantastic. Are you, yeah, are you an aerial branch or a crane branch where like you have 185-foot booms that cost, or are you a smaller location where you don't have anything bigger than a 60-foot boom? So my thing was like, I might be a $125 million branch and you might be a $300 million branch, but I have 4 times the amount of assets that I have to touch and 10 times the amount of people. So let's hold on real quick and say, you know, how much do I have? But those influxes was, I got to get 25 million in, I got to get it on rent, then I got to get it back. And oh, by the way, I got to get it serviced and ready so it doesn't sit on my downline for 3 months, kill my district, kill any other opportunity for anybody else to rent it. And so that's how you, like, I had to manage the seasonality, and those were big numbers and big fleets that are coming in and out. But I had to do that annually. It was every year. And I wish I had a service like this, because I can't tell you how many times I had to send out a bunch of needle scalers or a bunch of extension cords, or in the industrial world, copus blowers, or welders that basically went down in an 8-pack rack. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm putting this on a semi. There's no, like, how do I get it there? Because this contractor's paying his people $85 an hour for something that he can't use. Like, oh, we forgot the stinger in the ground. Great. You got a welder that you can't do anything with. Like, what are you doing here?
That's right. I'll give you the funniest story ever. So when I worked for United Rentals, and a quick history, when I worked for Ahern Equipment, Ahern Equipment had F-150s just like United Rentals and everybody else. And Ahern Equipment, a lot of people know this, but Ford F-150s had a problem with their EcoBoost engines for a while. So Don Ahern got really mad at Ford and said, hey, you need to compensate us for this. Ford says, we're not doing it. So Don Ahern went out and he bought little tiny Nissan Frontier trucks. And it was an embarrassment, because you'd pull up to a job site and it is basically a car with a little bed on the back. Like, you're just like, your butt's skimming. Like, you could get high centered on a flat road. And so we had all these Nissan Frontiers, terrible little trucks. Every single sales rep, here's exactly what they said. You know, the good thing is we don't have to tow or deliver anything anymore, because this thing can barely pull itself. And you sat there and you realized what a messed up, demented mind you have in the equipment industry when you're grateful for a really bad vehicle just so that the operations team doesn't stick you with go deliver a bucket, go deliver a set of forks, go deliver a generator, go get a compressor, go through a and we were like, dude, this is the best truck ever because it can't be used for anything but sales.
Dude, oh my gosh, you just triggered something in me that I just love to this day, and I hope he watches this podcast eventually. One of the best reps in the business, right? He's since retired. He was amazing, right? He actually had a nickname. I'm going to call him the Amazing Mazer. So Greg, if you're out there, this is all for you. Greg was so good at taking care of his customers. I mean, talk about a guy that could just make a relationship and keep it forever. Like I said, best in the business. But he was so good with his customers that Greg didn't know how to say no. Greg was like, hey, dude, let's just make it happen. To the point where when I first got into management, I got through the open POs and I saw all these PO numbers that said verbal Greg. And I literally had to start calling vendors and saying, hey, we can no longer pay your invoices on a verbal Greg PO, right? But Greg generated millions and millions of dollars worth of revenue. And I literally had to pull his truck from him and I gave him a Dodge Neon. Like no bed. And you know what? Greg still found a way to put stuff in the back of the, he probably, I think he ripped the back seat out of the Dodge Neon, completely out of it, and said, I'm going to figure out a way to deliver stuff to a customer. And I didn't fault him at all because he was doing what he had to do. You know, he was one of the reps that is like, just, I'll do whatever I got to do to take care of the customer. And so I would sit with the operation team and just like, you know how much revenue we're not getting because we have Greg going back and forth and back and forth. Like we need to help him with capacity because Greg would have put everything on in the branch on rent, but we couldn't keep up. We couldn't keep up with Greg. And so like I literally had to pull him because we were like, hey, we got to keep him out in the field. Let's pull the vehicle away, the truck away and give him a Dodge Neon. Well, Greg's like, I'll just pull the back seat out of the Dodge Neon and I'll deliver stuff.
Well, here's the big one is I'm okay with sales reps because I was somebody that always took care of my customers too. But here's one of the big ones. I watched too many operations teams where they think of sales as an additional resource for what is that? Go ahead, JP.
Oh, I said an extension.
Yeah, 100%. And they see them as that extension. And they're like, you know what we're going to do is we're just going to just give it to a sales rep, give it to a sales rep. And the reason why is oftentimes a lot of the big rental companies, the sales team is managed by the branch manager. And so the branch manager says, look, we need to make revenue. Therefore, everybody is a resource for delivering equipment. What they don't realize is the sales rep now needs to drive to the branch, take that time, wait, load it all up, take that piece of equipment, whatever it is, that part, that whatever, drive it out to the job site, drop it off, get it signed, and then they bring the paperwork back. You just lost a sales rep that could be using valuable selling time, and you've taught them don't sell, support. And the truth is you don't want your sales reps in support. You want them in sell because otherwise you can only go so long with support, and then you're not putting new blood into your business, and your business will dry up.
Yeah, I've heard some numbers thrown around, depending on industry, where you want your sales reps, whatever you compensate them, they need to be making between 10 and 100x that for you as a company a year. So when you divide that up by 52 weeks a year, 40 weeks or 40 hours in a week, roughly, whatever, that time adds up where you have a rep that if they waste just 1 hour or 2 hours, that could be thousands and thousands of dollars that is just unrealized loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the other thing is the majority of the time when ops needs help, respectfully, is in prime selling time. They don't need help.
Yeah, they need help when it's busy, right?
Yeah, they don't need help at 5 to 8 a.m. They don't need help at 3 to 6 p.m. They need it in the middle of the day. And then you're pulling the sales rep out of potential one-on-one sales time for operational support.
Oh, we had to eat crow ourselves with Pharaoh. Because when JP used to be in sales for us, right? And has then shifted and elevated to higher positions. But I remember, JP, and you probably as well too, where you would book a route and you're saying, hey, I'm going to work the north end of my territory and visit all of these clients.
And then
And
damn
then
it,
an order would come in.
site one and surprise, here they come.
Right. They would pull in an order and we didn't, and as we were growing, we didn't have enough drivers to be able to support it. So JP in his truck said, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll drive over to Surprise and do it. And the rest of his meetings for the day, gone. Like we're trying to grow a business.
Literally 3 to 4 hours out of my day. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, I can see that happening to companies right now all over the place. And even from the builder perspective, let's tone it down for a second. Like custom home builders. I talk to people all the time. My buddies that, they build these, $1 million houses or $10 million houses. And I'm like, how many projects you got? And he's like, I can only have 5. And I'm like, why? He goes, because me as the owner, I drive around on my F-350 and drop material off at job sites
all day long.
He goes, I can't go sell any more projects. I just got to, because what's my other option? Pulling one of my laborers off and then we don't get the window set or we don't get, the tile laid and the homeowner. And they're like, so I might as well just turn it, just be a delivery driver for my company.
I'll tell you a funny one. It's funny you should say that. So I was recently out in Myrtle Beach, not, riding around with the sales rep. They're building all these houses there in North Carolina. And as I'm out there, the sales rep says to me, he goes, I think this is the owner. I think this is the owner. I go, really? He goes, yeah. And a truck pulled up. I go, yeah, it's a pretty nice truck. That's probably somebody of importance. And the guy opens the back of his truck, drops the tailgate, and starts grabbing stuff out. I go, that might be a delivery guy. He goes, nope, that's the owner. And we jump out, and all of a sudden, we're helping this guy unload a truck. And he sat there, and the owner of the company said, he goes, this is the biggest problem I have, is I am no longer running my business. My business is running me.
Yep.
I felt terrible for that guy because he's driving this nice truck. And I'm like, dude, like even as salesmen, we're sitting there, we're pulling out boxes of nails and we're pulling out all these anchor bolts and stuff out of the back of his truck that he had to go get. And I'm like, dude, whatever that guy's time is worth, he's doing a position that probably could be done for 17, 18 bucks an hour. Just terrible.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder what there's no one size fits all solve. Obviously, I'm biased in part of that solution, but what's stopping people from just giving every salesperson what turns into a gun? Where if you just let using us as an example, if you gave every salesperson Pharaoh, they could just be pew pew pewing orders all day, getting stuff done. But then ops isn't taking care of that. Now, where's that balance point? Where do we shift that no into a yes between those two sides of the bridge?
The biggest thing, this industry, the equipment, the construction, the rental industry is so slow to make changes. Like I kid you not, like I was doing research the other day on AI. So ChatGPT has been out for officially 28 months. And in 28 months, they had a thing of who's using AI. So I go in and I do all this research on what industries are using AI. Less than 2% of the construction industry is using AI. Where other industries, it's 30, 40, 50% of people are using it. And I sat there and I looked at it and I was like, man, we are so slow to adapt. And then here's the secondary thing. All my years of running branches, when I would run a branch, you would look at your P&L, you would drop down, and guess what? You had allocated costs for trucking. And there was a line there for outside haulers. And if that number was anything besides 0, you got explaining to do. Now, it didn't matter if I won the order, didn't matter if I made money, didn't matter if my truck driver was out sick. If that number was anything besides 0, I failed. And I could never wrap my head around it because I sat there, I was like, we need to not look at how much money was allocated to trucking through our P&L, but how much revenue came in, how much did we bill our customers, and how much did it cost? And the problem is most rental companies aren't willing to take that span to see at what point did we make money. They just say, well, this is the way we've always done it, which is not a good way to run your business.
Yeah,
No,
would you
it's
rather
not.
have a piece of equipment sit on on the yard for another day or two because you don't have the capacity to move it? Or could you move it today in less than 2 hours? And all of a sudden, I mean, you have a couple more days on the rent. It
Well,
doesn't
what
sound
ends
like
up
much when you
happening,
do
like
that
Elliot
once, but when
says,
you do that 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, it starts adding up, right?
it does. And like Elliot's saying, it's the path of least resistance, right? And it's always like if you can give them like if it's the easiest thing to do, they'll just do it. So you can invest in like a TMS, transportation management system, and say, okay, we're going to do this with the resources that we have. Great programs, right? But you're still dealing with the same thing and saying, I don't want to look outside. And it reminds me of a story that was told me many moons ago. I don't know if you've heard the Meatloaf story.
Give it
So
to me.
a
Is it
Meatloaf story
the
is
artist or the meal?
no, it's actually so a
That's a
little
good question.
so family party, little they're cooking meatloaf. Everybody's had meatloaf, and typically meatloaf is has the ends cut off of it in some places. So a little girl asked mom, said, why is the ends off? And she's like, well, that's how my mom taught me how to do it. Why don't you go ask your grandmother why, how she cooked the meatloaf? And so she went and asked her grandmother, and her grandmother's like, well, my mom, who happens to still be alive, did it. Why don't you go ask your great grandmother? And so she asked her, she said, Grandma, why is the ends off the meatloaf? She goes, the meatloaf was this big and the pan was this big. So I just chopped it off. So for 4 generations, they're cooking it the same way because that's the way they all were taught. And now people are like, we have bigger pans. And it was just like, well, that's what they told me to do when they put me in the position. And this is all our company invested in. So we have to work within the confines of the resources we are given and maximize our return. When someone else might say, hey, I got a new toy or a new way of doing it. Could we think about adopting? And it's, oh, well, hold on. That's going to increase this line item. And we're like, I know, but we're going to put like another 2 million on rent. So is that a good thing?
Yeah, I'm going to be deadly honest with you. And here's the big one. I truly believe if the industry as a whole, I've went into companies booked me, they came in, I was super grateful. I go in and I'm talking to them about their rental business. And I said to the guy, what software do you use to manage your rentals, your orders, your flow, just so that I'm familiar? Because I've seen them all. And he goes, we still use hand tickets. And I know what hand tickets are. And I was like,
I don't know what they are, but I can guess.
They're hard
I'm
cards.
like, okay.
It doesn't.
And he goes,
It doesn't sound like a computer.
it has 3 pieces of paper. They have them custom done.
Yeah.
There's a white copy that goes to accounting. There's a pink copy that goes to the service department and goes to the driver. And then there's a yellow copy that goes to the sales rep that he turns in so that he gets paid for the order. And I'm like, when you guys are handwriting those, I said, is everybody's handwriting like clear? No. So errors are made? Yep. And I sat there and I looked at this and I realized we all got to face it right now. Like we have to come to the realization. The industry, the construction equipment industry has become the wave of the future. And it's not hyperbole, it's the truth. The reason why is companies went out, they said, look, we're going to buy big giant equipment. We're going to own it. We're going to have control of our business. And they go out, they buy a piece of equipment for $500,000. And 6 months later, COVID happens. And not one bank said, you know what? Why don't you just not make payments for a year and we'll just forgive the payments? Every single bank got their payments. And if you didn't pay for it,
They took it back.
they took it. So all of a sudden, companies realized, oh my gosh, my assets weren't making money. And I had a lot of my capital tied up in these pieces of equipment. So companies realized they needed to downsize their fleet and they needed to diversify into more rental, which gave them flexibility. Now, the entire industry has realized they're willing to pay a little bit for not having to deal with service, for not having to deal with pickup and deliveries, for not having to deal with having those on their books, and they free up capital and they free up their overhead. So rental is got a huge expansion path over the next 5-10 years. And the problem that's happening is that the industry is saying, well, this is the way we did it in 1986, and we're going to keep doing it this way. And if you don't evolve, I hate to say it, you will go the way of the dinosaur. Like the industry needs to kick in a high gear of how do we survive in this super hyper competitive and changing market? And if you can't do it,
How long do you think it takes to adapt to those changes? Because I'm wondering, is persistence just king? Is it just a matter of if you've got a good idea, is it just a matter of time? You just got to keep pushing, or does not? Is even that just pushing up against an immovable object? Are you not able to
So
find a crack in the wall?
I love what you're saying there. So here's a big one. I was out at the ARA where Scott and I hung out. And when I was at the ARA, um, I hung out with some of the people from the Canadian Rental Association. And I asked the guy, I'm like, hey, so what's different from the American Rental Association to the Canadian Rental Association? And he goes, the number one thing is the age. I go, oh,
Interesting.
okay. He goes, the average member of the Canadian ARA is over 60 years old. He goes, as I'm starting to look at the ARA in the United States, he goes, your average age is below 50. He goes, like, it is a much younger crowd coming into the industry. I was like, absolutely it is. I think that we're on the cusp of that next generation coming in, and hopefully they will be massively adaptive and they're not doing meatloaf like Scott said, but they're saying, you know what? Just because my mom made the meatloaf this way does not mean I need to make it this way. It means that I can go out and tap into every resource imaginable. You know, we're seeing companies where they're now using GPS, they're using telematics, they're using better software, they're using better websites. I mean, the industry's coming along. It's just people need to crack into the fact of you can't just look at one or two things. You have to sit down and do a self evaluation. Look at every aspect of your business. Like we can talk about trucking because of Pharaoh and everything, but what are you doing for your drivers? What are you doing for your service techs? What are you doing for your parts department? What are you doing for your customer interaction with you? And if you're not taking every one of the chunks of your business, evaluating each chunk, you're missing those little margins that are going to end up being the demise of your company in 6 to 8 months.
One of the things that's still it's not troubling is not the right word, but it's the best one I've got is that it's a little bit of a hypocrisy of something that you and Scott have both said, but the reality seems different. And that is that the path of least resistance is the one that's chosen, but that doesn't actually seem to be the case sometimes in construction. Like just by that, kind of what you've been describing is that even if you give them on a silver platter a path that is less resistant, they still are just so ingrained in doing it the same way.
Sometimes they just don't have the right size pan, right? So if you look at somebody from an operation standpoint, of like, let's just take, for instance, Faro, because we're biased, right? They don't even know it exists. And now they have the ability to say it does exist, but they have outside or say inside entities saying, hey, no, we want to reduce that number. Like, it's like, I can use this, but you won't let me use it. And I don't want to get in trouble, but the sales rep's barking at me and the customer on the other end saying, when is it going to be here? But the directive is no, figure out basically how we're going to get there with our resources and kill yourself, because there's a lot of operations teams out there. They're great people. They give it 150% every day. I mean, they are the foundation of just making things happen, but sometimes they're handcuffed and they're like, I want to use this new bigger pan shiny object, but I'll get in trouble if I do it because they said, did you not do this? We want you to try to solve every end or side of the Rubik's Cube before you even decide. And you're like, I just lost like 2 hours and we delayed everything and no one's happy. And we end up using a Pharaoh service anyways. That's where it comes into the point where you're just like, and again, I'll throw myself under the bus. How many times have I just been in my own way because I'm like, nope, this is how I do it.
That's right.
Man. And that's the question I would ask everybody that's like listening, right? Whether or not you're a contractor with a bunch of crews working jobs, whether you're a building material supplier, an OEM that's transitioning to get parts to your customers, or rental companies that are trying to expand. It's like, what is it going to take for us to just remove the blinders off of our eyes and start getting some peripheral vision without giving the sales rep the gun, like you said, JP, which turns into my story about Greg, who everything's a verbal Greg PO.
Yeah.
Like, we've got to make headway, but we got to do it strategically. And if we keep, to your point, Elliott, the dinosaurs, if we keep basically fighting wars with rocks and spears, eventually someone's going to come with a plane and just knock us all out.
See, and so JP, to kind of enlighten what I have come to discover is that the industry is dying for change and dying for evolution. And it's not that the industry doesn't want it. They do. Scott's right. They want it. Here's what the problem is. It's a culture shift. And the reason why it's a culture shift is, ready? Oh, my phone rang. Oh, hey, hold on. Hold on. I got an order coming in. Yeah, let me take care of that. And what happens is we are taught as an industry to become crisis managers. You know when we make a change? When it's a crisis. I find very little rental companies that sit down and say, hey, why don't we plan out our year of what we want to do every single week going forward? What do we want to do for employee engagement? What do we want to do for employee training? What do we want to do for mechanic appreciation? They don't do anything. And then all of a sudden they get to a day and they're like, whoa, we've got a problem. Yo, I'll solve it. Check out my beat, and you sit there and you're like, dude, you can't be doing this crisis management. So I think the biggest thing is that as a culture, the industry is a bunch of crisis managers. I think the other thing is the biggest challenge that like Faro and other companies have is that there's an enlightenment phase. And enlightenment is how many people know about you? And I've battled this where I go in and all of a sudden I'm walking in and Scott gave a wonderful comment where there's people at the ARA and they're like, oh, that's Elliott. But I also had years where I walked into a room and nobody knew who I was. And there's that enlightenment phase. And then the thing is then there's the engagement phase where people say, okay, now I'm enlightened to what opportunities are out there. How do I engage? How would I bring this on board? Am I going to cause a mutiny where my driver's going to be like, I can't believe you outsourced this. I could have gotten overtime. I actually heard that argument at a branch one day. I'm like, so we could hire someone else to do it and save the company money, or pay one of our drivers time and a half and wear and tear on our vehicle. Like it's a no-brainer, but the company gets mad. So they say, well, we'll just overwork our drivers until they burn out. And
Or
then
even
the last part of
and on the upside too, the dispatchers burn out all the time too.
absolutely. And then I think the last phase is the implementation. Is people sit there and they say, okay, I understand. I'm enlightened to the new process. I'm engaged with how we would use it. But now how do I implement it? Like how easy is it? And there's just a day where I remember I went up, I jumped in a taxi cab like everybody does in Vegas. The guy completely goofed me over. And I stepped out of the taxi cab and I said, I will never use a taxi again. I walked in and I said, does anybody know how to use Uber? And everybody started laughing. I was like, what? And they're like, you don't? I was like, no, I've never had a need for it. Now I'm an Uber god. But it's that moment where you have to have enough pain to make the transition. And I think that once people realize you don't have to just have pain to make transition, you can also have inspiration to make transition. And people need to inspire themselves to look at what else could they do to make their business better.
They do. And there's some things that you can't control. I tell people all the time, I have a medical condition, it's terminal, and it's called OLD. And some of the doctors like, I don't know how to help you on that. And they're like, what is OLD? And I'm like, I'm old, man.
I'm old.
Like, you can't stop Father Time.
No, you can't.
Right. So, but there's certain things I can do. I can eat right. I can work out, good rest. I can spend time in the good book, right? Where it fills me up.
That's right.
Those are the things I help to manage my OLD. And in the rental industry too, people that don't work in it will give you a little secret. Not everything is sitting on a ready line with a bow on it. I mean, it's kind of like the orders they get placed and or executed within like maybe a 24 to 36 hour window. JP, you made a comment with Carlos on the our guest. I guess a Seinfeld.
You know how to take a reservation, but you don't know how to keep a reservation or whatever it is. Yeah,
it was like you got to hold a reservation. So what ends up happening is, okay, let's say Elliott's a contractor and he's going to call in because he's a planner and saying, hey, I'm going to need 2 19-foot scissor lifts and a 6,000-pound reach fork from my job site in 2 weeks because I'm flying into town from Denver and I've got a project in Vegas. Oh, no problem. We'll take your reservation, sir. We got you. We'll take care of you. the rental companies doesn't start looking for that 19-foot scissor and or that 6K reach until probably maybe 2 days before his reservation, because they're like, well, we want to get it prepared for him. We're like, no, there's an order for tomorrow that someone called in last minute. You got to put that thing on. We'll worry about Elliott's order later, hoping that they can either have something that's called off, something that's transferred in, or something that come off the downline to fulfill his order that he placed 2 weeks ago. Because he's like, I'm a planner. And now you look at the rental company, it's like fighting the OLD. It's like, I can only control so much of what the end user is going to do. And what Pharaoh and what innovation is going to do for you is like, okay, I'm going to give you this B12 shot or multivitamin that's going to help you, right? It's going to basically say you can sustain this last minute, because crisis management is not always about the crisis that you create. It's about how you respond to the crisis.
And
So
I'll tell you, it's funny you should say that, because I used to be that planner, and I realized the customer that would call in last minute, and we actually teach our customers this. If they call in last minute, their order gets filled. But if I have an order, like we would do it all the time, we would get to the winter in Colorado, just before winter set in, you would have what was known as blowout season, which is where everybody needs compressors. They hook the compressors up to their irrigation system and they blow all the water out so it doesn't freeze and crack. I would put in orders in July to reserve those compressors. And they were all set for October 1st. And we would have customers that would call up September 29th and be like, "Hey, you guys got a couple of compressors?" And the branch would be like, "We do. We got a whole ton of them sitting here." And lo and behold, that guy would grab them, and my customer would be like, "I put that order in 3 to 4 months ago, and you don't have them? How are you not prepared?" And you go look in the reservations, you're like, "We rewarded the person who didn't prepare, and we penalized the person who did."
and the reps at the same time too, and this is this balance between the reps. You're just like, hey, I just got you more orders. Like, I can't help that you don't have enough compressors. I want my last minute guy and my 4-month guy to all be service, because I just went out and spent 6 months trying to get his business. You have to go fulfill it. And it turns back into, we talked about building cultures and communities and culture. It's not my customer or your customer, it's our customer.
There it is.
And that goes back to this dynamic between I, you. And I'm like, why does it have to be me versus you? It's like, we have a customer, we have customers we have to take care of. We're doing the best we can, right? We don't have the ability to teleport or just create things off of 3D printing for equipment. So sales reps, we need you to sell our inventory and our capacity. In operations, we need you to utilize tools out there that is going to help you increase your capacity. So at the end of the day, your end user, our organization, and our culture thrive.
That's it. I will tell you, one of the things I run into all the time, you mentioned that kind of brand building. How many companies out there, the sales reps fight more internally than they do with the competition? And because they don't understand, hey, listen, you need to build your brand. And they're like, if I can make a choice, I want Scott and JP to lose, so that I won't tell them about fleet. I won't tell them about what's going on. I won't show them, opportunities. I will just not help my own team members. And they don't realize that they're actually undermining their entire brand for the sake of the individual. And they don't realize that it's self defamation, self defecation. If you don't help people on your team and you don't grow your brand, pretty soon you're going to stop existing.
It's parasitic. It's like
It is.
it's
Good
like
word.
feeding off a host. And so what happens is, in the rental game, like I'm sure with other businesses, there's acronyms for everything. I can't remember how many times our sales reps in rental would go out and talk to the customer using an acronym. The customer would be like, I have no idea what OEC means. Talk to me like I'm a person, not like in your cocoon. And you have this friction between ops and sales, where operations teams like, oh, are you at lunch right now? Or what hole are you on for the golf course? Because I know you got to get back for happy hour, right? When I'm in here just like basically surviving off of donut holes and Red Bulls, trying to fulfill your orders. And then the sales team's golfing with their customer. I'm like, hold on, let me call the sales prevention team, SPT, and they'll tell us what they can't do. right? And so it's like it's all tongue in cheek, but at the end of the day, there is this like underlying kind of like, oh, ops is going to give me a hard time, and sales is going to overcommit, and so we're just kind of like coexisting rather than just saying like, how do we like build each other up?
I'm going to say that again for the people in the back row that weren't listening.
Which part? The whole
The
thing?
fact that we need to work as a team. I'll be honest with you. The best companies that I run into, there is continuity. Like they understand our goal is to selflessly get the ball across the goal line. And if that means that you're the person carrying the ball or pushing their butt or having somebody climb over the top of you or just acting as a distraction on the flanks, every one of us plays a part. And the problem is say what you want about Travis Kelce, but we all saw in the Super Bowl where he got ripped and got very, very complained about when there was a panic going on. He was standing in the middle of the field, kind of looking around. And everybody's like, look, it takes everybody on the team to step up and work as a team if you're going to get the results. And I think you're exactly right. The companies that are going to win in the coming market are not ones where they're divided and siloed, but they unify that we have one goal: fill every order any way possible. Our goal is to generate revenue, not egos.
And we're gonna have another podcast coming up, so hopefully everyone will tune in. That kind of segues into leadership. And we have a lot of companies in the States and abroad that have a whole lot of good managers, but very few leaders and or mentors. And what I want to challenge the sales team is like, you can be a leader and it's not about your job title. Like, what are you doing to invest time in that ISR or that EA that wants to basically advance up? We companies, and again, this is for future podcasts, we're going to talk about I think the three biggest challenges most companies run into, and that's recruitment, retainment, and empowerment. And figuring out how the best in class are navigating those three things. And I really truly believe that it all stops and starts with leadership. So,
Love it, brother.
that being said, I want to land this plane. Yeah, we're starting new, so we want to get a few more in the hopper before we release. But one of the things, and that we're still rolling right now, is we want to ask everybody that comes on, like, what motivates you, like from a philanthropic, like your company, Elliott? What are you doing in your community? What are you bringing exposure to the people that or areas that are unrepresented? Like, what's your passion project outside of elevating and leading sales teams?
Um, I'll be blatantly honest with you. So being an entrepreneur, like it has consumed me. And today's been a really tough day. You go down and you see your accountant and you find out you got to pay a bunch of money and you realize that I didn't get paid to be at the ARA. I paid to be there. And so you realize we made no money in December and we made no money in January. And all the work that I'm doing until those checks come in, you're in panic mode. And so I have literally spent, um, the rule in businesses is that in year one, you survive, year two, you invest, and year three, you start scaling and you can possibly pull money out. Well, I just wrapped up year two and I've invested so much in giving. Anybody who calls me up and asks for anything, I give it. And to a crazy level. Somebody called me up and they're like, hey, we're having a golf event for construction guys. And my wife said, did you just send $5,000 worth of Legos in a big giant gift bag? I'm like, yeah, because there's some grandpa or dad, and he's going to see that and he's going to want his kid to have that for Christmas or his grandkid or somebody. And it's going to inspire somebody. Any of the, women in construction, I ended up sending out a whole bunch of stuff to women in construction, women that inspire me. And I get the luxury of when I jump in the truck with them, people will never understand what some of those women have gone through in this industry. And I sit there and I'm like, wow, that is a different vision. Right now, my give, I hate to say it anymore, has become 100% in the industry and into the people. We give a lot to charities and things, but the fact that I give to the Humane Society and I give to the Denver Dumb Friends League, I think those are great. But I'll send you an email that I got yesterday, from a woman where I coached her husband, and now she made me come and train at her company. And her email said, "I don't know if you realize that you saved our marriage." And that to me was one of those ones where you go, you never know if you make a difference. But when a woman says, "Thank you for saving my marriage," I don't know how my overall impact will be on where I'm going when I die, but I hope that one counts for something. So right now, I wish I was in a better state where I could give more. But honestly, I'm at a point where I don't know what's left in the tank. It is a definite challenge when you wake up every day and you realize that this is a battle. And I've given, and I just need to be open to receive. And I have to see when things are going to start going the right direction. This past week I got to present to Caterpillar. It's one of my goals. I wanted to present to the ARA, one of my goals. And unfortunately, you do those and you sell your heart out, like amazing reviews. They don't pay. So you have to make a decision. You just keep going your mission and say, I guess we're selling this house, which my wife wasn't happy about, but you got to make the decisions you got to make.
Yeah, I feel you, man. Being a startup and stuff like that. And, we're kind of those same places where, you invest, you lose, and sometimes you're not profitable for 5 years, right? 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
3 years is a good run. Some businesses never break even, right? Uber went for a long time. I don't think they ever made a profit, right? But the impact that you're making on the industry, my friend, it does make a difference. And I want you to know that you might not be able to reach everybody, but the people that you are reaching, you're making a significant impact. And your presence carries more weight than you sending a present. So continue to keep doing what you're doing, investing your heart and your soul into others like the servant that you are. And I know when it's our time and they look at the dash on whatever marker we want to put on the ground, it ain't going to be about your name and it ain't going to be about your dates. It's going to be the dash that you left and the mark that you left on this industry. And I just appreciate being able to be in the same room with you and having conversation with you. And I wish you all the success that you deserve.
The feeling is mutual. I am really excited for what you're doing. I'm excited for what you guys are building. I think you're solving a massive, massive problem in the industry. I think your heart's in the right place. I will do whatever I can to promote it. If you're down there in Texas, do me a favor. I will tell Andy Hudson you need to go over and you need to hang out with him for a day. Stewart and Stevenson is a big company, and they're expanding by leaps and bounds. They're part of a multi-billion-dollar company. That could be a very nice catalyst for you to get things rolling. So I would love for you to sit down with their team and see how Faro can become part of Stewart and Stevenson, because they are very seasonal and they have a lot of emergencies. And I think that would be an absolutely perfect fit going across the Gulf Coast and up into Arizona and New Mexico.
Yeah, JP, let's write that down. Obviously, one for our teams out in the field, but also for a future podcast guest. Elliott, you're connected in the industry and you know a lot of dynamic people that are great storytellers and have a lot of good content. So, anybody that you think, would like to share or be on a podcast like this and talk about just real raw stuff, nothing scripted that we do in this podcast. I mean, this is not a peppered, let me ask you a question, you give me an answer. Like, we don't know.
Absolutely blessed. Thank you both for your time today. It means the world to me that you would even consider me.
Thank you so much for bringing your beard, for bringing your pet presence, for bringing that golden tan that you had from your time in Myrtle Beach to bless us with your presence.
Well, I want to thank you. It's kind of interesting when I go onto a podcast and you've got me taking notes because it was such an intriguing conversation. I'm sure when people look at this later, they're going to be like, oh, look at him jotting all this stuff down. I love a great conversation. Thank you for what you guys do for the industry. Thank you for the difference you make. And thank you for making me think, because that's what we all need to do more of.
Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll see you around.
Well, everyone, that is a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Build. We took away some real valuable lessons and insights, and I hope that you did as well.
If you enjoyed this episode, We would ask that you subscribe so you can never miss an update. If you're a thought leader looking to innovate in the construction industry, let's talk. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts.
You can find Beyond the Build on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, plus anywhere else that you listen. And if you'd like to learn more about how Faro is changing logistics in the construction industry, please visit our website at faronow.com.
Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, be humble, serve others, and make an impact.